Hi and welcome to this video where I show you how I color a page in Magische Meerjungfrauen by Christl Vogl, and most importantly, how I choose the colors for the underwater landscape. If you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Ina. If not, welcome back. I've chose this page called The Most Beautiful Playground. It's a wreck surrounded by sharks. Interesting for the mermaid children, but dangerous for the mothers. Or rather, the mothers see the danger and want to save their children. Now the question is, how do I color this wreck and how can I visually push it into the background? What colors should I use for that? For this I have an example photo here. If you look at this wooden wreck, you will see a brown wreck, perhaps with a slight greenish tint in some areas, due to algae. And here in the foreground you can see a diver with a yellow diving tank, and even on the mask there's a bit of yellow. I would even say it's neon yellow. So what happened when we pick up a color from this image? I'd start with the lighter areas of the wreck up here, where the light hits. Now I'm switching to the brush and applying the color to the side here. As you can see, it's not brown, it's not green either, and it even looks much darker than in the picture. Now I'll pick another color from the wood further down. And here you can see again, it's blue, definitely not brown or green. If I now go into the very dark area, you can also see here that the color is a dark blue. In comparison, we can also pick the different watercolors. One light blue at the top, a darker blue in the middle, and a very dark blue at the bottom. Here you can see that this almost matches the middle color of the wreck. And if we look again at the very bottom, which actually appears relatively light, the color itself is a bit greener than the others, but still relatively dark compared to what we perceive. If we also pick the yellow of the diving tank, you'll see it's not yellow at all, but rather a mint or even turquoise. So why is it that the colors we see aren't the actual colors present? This is because color perception is highly individual and based on experience. The brain doesn't just see colors, it interprets them. Since we know the boat is made of wood, and perhaps we've seen wood that's been underwater for a long time, we assume it looks a certain way. But in reality, it doesn't look like that. The brain imposes this interpretation, just like with the diving tank and the piece of the diving mask. We know it's yellow, and our brain interprets it as yellow. But in reality, it's not yellow at all. It's light turquoise mint. But why does an object, which we know has a different color outside the water, appear different underwater? This is because different colors have different wavelengths, and the longer the wavelength, the less visible they are underwater. Red, for example, is a color that you can only see when it's very close, and the further away the red is, the less visible it becomes. Next comes orange, yellow, and then green. What remains visible is blue. The distance at which you can still see these colors, of course, depends on the clarity of the water. Here I have a fish for comparison. You can see that it appears yellow, while the background is relatively bluish. If we pick the color from the fish and paint it here, you can see that in this case it is indeed yellow, because the fish is much closer to the camera compared to, for example, the wreck and the diver. This means that objects further away from you underwater, further back in the image, appear increasingly bluish and have fewer other colors, while objects that are close to you still retain their usual familiar color. If we now take another look at the picture with the wreck, you can see that the sharks are also relatively far back in the image, and accordingly should appear somewhat bluish. I also have another picture of a shark here, which wasn't directly in front of the camera, but a bit farther away. We know the underside of the shark is white or light gray. When I pick the color here again, you can see it's relatively dark blue turquoise. Although it appears very bright here, when I pick the lighter color from the top side, it's also relatively dark. And most importantly, it's blue again, even though the shark itself is actually more gray from above. Now for comparison, I'll pick an even darker color from the shark, and that's blue again. It's such a dark blue that it's almost black. It's fascinating how dark the color of the shark's belly is, even though it's actually the lightest part of the shark. Alright, since I've already picked out the colors, I now compare them with my swatch card from my Castle Art soft touch pencils and see if I can match the colors reasonably well. Due to color perception influenced by the brain through experience, it's quite possible that we perceive colors differently in a photo than in a colored picture. This means it might actually look better in the end if you use the colors you would typically expect. But that's exactly what I'm not going to do now. If we take another look at the picture in Magische Meerjungfrauen, you see that the mermaids themselves and also this anchor at the front are very much in the foreground. Therefore, they could indeed have the normal colors, as we know them from above the water's surface. In contrast, the aquatic plants in the background should appear more bluish, just like the sails of the wreck, which you might expect to be white or light beige. Okay, I start with the water. I would say for the top color of the water I could use Cobalt turquoise. Then it could transition into intense blue, and further down a mix of ultramarine light, ultramarine and Cypress Green. I quickly grab the colors. Okay, let's see if the gradient from these colors look good, even though I'm not creating a smooth blend right now. Over ultramarine light and ultramarine, I'll add a layer of Cypress Green. And this already comes quite close to the colors in the photo. I mean, I don't have an endless supply of pencils. It's a set of 120, but even that is naturally limited when it comes to the shades of blue. So I have to work with the colors I have. For the wreck, I would lean towards Cobalt Turquoise Green, then Teal Green Light, and maybe even Phthalo Green. I pick out a few pencils and see which ones come closest to the selected colors. I'll start with Cobalt Turquoise Green, then Teal Green Light and Teal Green. Now the question is Phthalo Green, Viridian or Indigo. As you can see, this leans quite greenish, but if I go over it with Indigo, the colors actually match quite well. Yes, I think these colors work well for the wreck. Now let's take a look at the shark picture. Actually, I don't want to use the same colors for the sharks as for the wreck. Let's see. When I look at the coloring page, the sharks are roughly at the same distance as the wreck. Well, maybe just a little bit farther back. Okay, I've decided. I'll use the same colors as for the wreck and Cypress Green for the underside of the shark. As for the sand, it still looks normal at the front of the picture and becomes increasingly greenish and then bluish toward the back. I don't have a reference photo for this, but that's fine. I'll use yellow ochre light for the very front area, then green gold, cadmium green pale, sap green, oxide of chrome, chrome green, and finally indigo. Maybe I'll skip the light green here. I like to prime the pages in Christl Vogel's books with water-based markers or watercolors that I make from felt pens. Let's see which colors I have available for that. I've picked out a few here and will now test how the color actually looks since I haven't swatched these old felt pens. I won't paint directly in the book with the felt pens, but instead on a piece of plastic. Then dilute the whole thing with a drop of water and apply it with a brush. This will dilute the color even further. I will already use these two small ones for the water. This one is very green, but this light brown might work well for the front sand area. I still need a turquoise. Let's see if I have one. By the way, I browsed through a tin with lots of old felt pens. I found one more. I'm using these 5 pens now. It's not so important that the colors match 100% because I'll be going over them with colored pencils anyway. Right now, the image is definitely in its ugly phase. It's not very neat at the moment, but it will definitely look better in the end. This layer of color, however, ensures that the colors will appear more vibrant and intense, and it also prevents any white paper from showing through when I apply the colored pencils. Since the ship, according to the little story of the left side, is loaded with gold, silver, diamonds and gemstones, I'm making the blue above the ship a bit lighter, as if the treasures are reflecting the light. The mermaid picture is, of course, not realistic, but it still bothers me a little that the sharks are missing fins. The pelvic fins, the small one near the tail fin, and even the pectoral fins on the big one. Some felt pens only draw well on the plastic sheet at first, especially when the area is damp. But after a short break, they usually work again. As you can see, I also mix the colors on the foil from time to time. As I mentioned before, it really doesn't look good yet. I'm starting with the water and the pencils I've chosen for it. Here I quickly realized that I had mixed up the two darkest colors, because I swapped the numbers, as I only looked at the colors at the end of the pencils, which are not accurate. But that's not a big deal. It won't be very noticeable in the end. I also generally don't color the transitions between colors as straight lines, but irregularly to make it look more natural. Additionally, I use the darker color for the areas where these lines are, to bring a bit of movement into the water, even though it won't be very noticeable in the end. Now I'll read you the translated little story that explains why this wreck with sharks is called the most beautiful playground. Where the pirate ship sank to the bottom many hundreds of years ago, it was always particularly dark. The ship was richly loaded with gold, silver, gemstones, and even diamonds. Like silent guardians, large sharks slowly swam around the shipwreck. But just as it is with human children, this place attracted the mermaid children like a magnet. It was exciting and at the same time dangerous to play here. Adventure was already waiting, because on board the large ship one could really enjoy a good scare. As captains or pirates, they hid the gold and silver until the concerned parent arrived. They always ended the adventure very quickly, and the children were scolded. How many times have I told you not to swim to the pirate ship? Dangerous sharks and other predatory fish are lurking around here. Come home quickly. The children cried and protested, but it was of no use. They were simply taken away, far from the most beautiful playground of all the 7 seas. Okay, the water is done. Now it's time to move on to the sandy seabed. These lines, representing the structure of the ground, are incredibly helpful. This way I can color the individual sections with different shades. I must say it looks better than I expected. I was a bit worried that the seabed might look odd, but it actually adds real depth to the picture. Next, I will work on the wreck. I start by using the lightest shade to mark the highlights, and then proceed as usual from the darkest to the lightest tone. Even though it takes more time, I always completely finish small sections before moving on to the next, rather than switching from pencil to pencil. I do this to maintain a better overview, as all these lines on the wreck can be somewhat confusing. In the lower part of the wreck, I don't use the lightest tones, while in the upper area I avoid the darkest tones. Somehow at this point I completely forgot that I wanted to layer some colors. But I still like the result. After finishing the shipwreck, I continue with the aquatic plants. Once those are colored, I move on to the sharks. At this point, I was simply hoping that I could make the shark's belly appear light, even though the chosen color is quite dark. After completing the first shark, what I had feared happened. The underside didn't really look light. I looked for a darker shade of blue, but I couldn't find one. Eventually, I decided to use black to make the contrast between the upper and lower halves more pronounced. I think that really made the difference. Now we finally come to the mermaids in the foreground. Since my idea was to give the page a touch of Halloween, I chose the typical Halloween colors, orange and pink purple. I thought it would look nice if I colored the mermaid mothers and daughters in the same colors. In hindsight, I would probably have decided differently, but that's okay. For all the small objects, that look like stones on the ground and also in other areas, I used gold and silver gel pens to represent the treasure scattered around by the children's play. To finish, I use a white gel pen from Sakura to color the small air bubbles white and outline the larger ones. As always, with white gel or acrylic pens on pink, the white turns pinkish. But since air bubbles are transparent, it actually fits quite well in this case. Afterwards, I added some glitter. I used a light blue glitter marker from Deco Time, where the treasure reflects the light to create a slight glow. Then I added glitter to the mermaids' tails, using glitter gel pens from my bag, in orange, pink and purple. I really like how the blue turquoise tones help to push the sharks and the wreck into the background. I hope this video was helpful for you. Bye and see you next time.